If you want to know how to be successful in your next interview, knowing how to tell your career story is critical. So in today's live stream career question and answer video, where's this coming from? You are going to learn how to, give me a second. You are going to learn 3 power tips to help you learn how to answer star interview questions and answers in an interview. So let me know if this is your first time here. Go ahead and give us a hello in the chat. My team is here to help us answer questions and to monitor our chat area. So make sure you let us know in the chat where you're coming to us from. If you've never met me before, I'm Heather Austin from ProfessorAustin.com, and on this channel, I help working professionals build their personal brand so that they can find their dream job and grow in a career you love. So if you're new to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Also, if you can hear audio and videos coming through okay for you, go ahead and give this video a big, huge thumbs up. So today we have a lot to cover when it comes to star interview questions. Now, if you've ever joined me live before, you know that I love to share slides. So I'm gonna go ahead and share some slides with you today. But before I do, let me jump into the chat and see who we have here. It looks like Michelle joined us. Hello, Michelle. She's from Greensboro, North Carolina. Super excited to have you. Stephanie's here. Hello, Stephanie. Nice to have you from Los Angeles. Looks like we have someone, not sure your screen name, from San Diego. Super happy to have you here as well. Ala is here from Calgary. Welcome. I love when we have Canadians in the house. We have someone here from Virginia, and of course, we can't leave out New York. Welcome, everyone. We have a lot to cover today. So again, I always tell you, if you are at home watching this, or you're in a place where you can take notes, take some notes, because we have a lot to cover. We'll also be sharing some links during this live stream career question and answer series. So be aware of those. My team will pop those into the chat when we get ready to share those links with you. So again, we are going to be talking about how to answer star interview questions. Now, let me also know in the chat if you have ever been asked a star interview question before. And we're going to go into more detail if you're wondering, what are star interview questions? We'll definitely go into more detail about that. But let me know in the chat, have you ever been asked a star interview question? Looks like we have Dora is here from Michigan. Welcome, Todd. Hello. So glad that you could join us, Todd, from Chicago. Carol Lee, hello from H-Town. So good to have you guys. So let me know again in the chat, have you ever been asked a star interview question before? So you've been on an interview and you've been asked a question that maybe you weren't 100% sure of how to answer. So let me take a quick look so that you can kind of see what these star questions or star interview questions are known as. So we also have what we call behavioral interview questions. So maybe you've been asked one of those before, or maybe you've been asked a situational interview question. So again, we have behavioral, situation, and competency-based interview questions. Now, these all come together and they're all basically the same type of question. So that's why we're going to conquer these today. You have your star, behavioral, situation, or competency-based questions. Now, these questions come in many different formats. So here's a quick example of what you might see in an interview with these types of questions. Again, they're all the same. So you have your star, behavioral, situational, and competency-based questions. So you might have someone that asks you in an interview, hey, give me an example of, okay? And then they ask you to give them an example of something, like a situation where you did this and that. They might even say, describe a situation where you, and then they go on to ask their question. Or they might ask you, tell me about a time when. Okay, so you might get, give me an example of, describe a situation where, or tell me about a time when. Now, these questions, again, they're all the same. They're asked by interviewers because interviewers want to know how you've performed in the past in certain situations. And they use your response. So whatever you tell them how you've performed, or when you give them an example, they use your response as a way to determine how you're going to solve problems for them in the future. So they're using your past problem-solving experience to help them decide, hey, can this person help us solve our problems moving forward into the future? So I'm going to share with you today 3 tips to help you answer these questions, and then I'm going to jump into what we call the STAR interview technique so that you can understand how to better answer these questions in your next interview. So let's jump really quick to step number 1. So here we are, step number 1. Step number 1, or tip 1, when it comes to answering these behavioral type questions, so they're situational. You're going to have to describe a time when you did something. You want to keep it positive. Okay, you never want to mention something that maybe a supervisor or a colleague or a coworker did that kind of made you angry and where you have to put them in a negative light. If you put your coworkers or your previous company or your boss, your previous boss, whatever it is, in a negative light, what that's showing the employer is that you're not very good at solving problems. So we don't ever want to speak negatively about other people when we are asked this question. Another thing to keep in mind when you want to talk about something positive is think about something that you can mention that shows your leadership or your teamwork ability. So anything that shows how were you able to lead your company in a specific situation so that they came out on top. Now, maybe not everyone came out on top, and you don't need to mention that negative part of it, but again, keep it positive. And also, let me make a quick note here. We are going to have time to answer questions. So again, if you're here with me live, feel free to hop into the chat. My team is gathering questions for me so that I can answer them for you at the end. If you are listening to this as on a replay, pop your question into the comment section and I'll jump back in later and do my best to answer the questions that you all have. Okay, let's move on to tip number 2. So tip number 2 is to keep it relevant. Okay, so tip number 1 is to stay positive. Tip number 2, keep it relevant. So when we talk about a situation, so again, we're coming up with, they asked us, describe a time when, or tell me about a situation where. Whatever that question is that they are going to ask you, you want to make sure it's relevant. So you want to do your very best to talk about something that relates to the position you're applying for. Okay, you don't want to bring up a situation that has nothing to do with the position you're applying for. You always want to relate to the position you're applying for. Also, mention something that was recent. Okay, you don't want to mention something that happened 5-10 years ago. You want to keep it relevant and current to that situation. Now here's a little tip here I want to add to step 2 when we talk about keep it relevant is you want to make sure that you really show your problem solving ability. So one way to do this is to mention something where maybe you were under pressure. Okay, so maybe you were under pressure in some way, or maybe you are facing time constraints. Or here's a kicker. Maybe it involved another person's emotions. Okay, how did you come out on top? How were you able to solve that problem effectively? So that would be tip number 2. Let's jump into tip number 3. Keep it results oriented. Okay, so tip number 3 is keep it results oriented. So what do I mean by that? And I'm going to show you guys in just a second a little simple tool that you can apply to these questions to make sure it's results oriented. Employers want to see what results you achieved in certain situations. Okay, they want to know how did you get to where, how did you calculate that decision-making process? How did you get to solving those problems? So I have a secret method I'm going to share with you, and it's really not secret. It's actually called the STAR interview technique. So again, the STAR interview technique, I'm going to show you guys some slides here really quick, and I'm going to take my face off the screen so that you can see the slides really well. So when it comes to the STAR interview technique, we are going to conquer behavioral interview questions, situational interview questions. We're going to conquer all those interview questions with what we call the STAR interview technique. So again, S stands for situation. So this is where you're going to talk about the situation. T stands for task. A stands for action. And R stands for result. So I want to walk you through each of these areas so that you understand how to develop your career story, and more importantly, how to develop micro stories within your interview response so that you can show your employer that yes, well, your potential employer, that yes, you are fantastic at solving problems. So let's first look at the S. So the S is the very first part to our us answering these interview questions. Now, I kind of like to group the S and the T together, but let's just focus on S for a second. So S is your situation. So this is where you are going to start your answer by giving the interviewer some sort of context to clearly explain the situation that you are in. Okay, so we want to give them background. Now, I'm going to show you guys an exact example that you can read through and then think about how will you answer this in your next interview. So again, S stands for how are we going to explain the situation? We want to give them some sort of context to that situation. Okay, we want to give them a little bit more detail. Now let's look at the T. So T stands for the task part of this. So this is where you are going to mention the task at hand or the specific role or your colleague's role in that situation. So what were some of the tasks at hand that resulted in this situation? So that goes the S and the T. Next, we are going to look at the A. Now, the A and the R, which is our action and our result, these ones are big. These ones are big. You got to make sure you get the details really straight on these ones. So action is, A is action once you've provided some sort of context. So you've given them the situation, you've given them some sort of background information. Now what you are going to talk about is the action steps that you took to overcome the difficult situation. So again, these are the action steps that you took to overcome the difficult situation. And again, feel free to pop questions that you guys have about the STAR interview question and answer approach. Behavioral interview questions, they're the same thing. Competency-based interview questions, or even situational-based interview questions. Make sure you pop any questions you have in the chat so we can spend a couple minutes at the end here answering them. So again, A is your action. What action steps did you take to while you were in that difficult situation, or any situation? It doesn't even have to be a difficult situation. Next one that we want to review here is your R. So R is the result. Now this is probably one of the most important parts to this interview question, is the result. What was the result that you achieved, or that your company achieved, or that your team achieved because of how you handled that situation? Okay, so we have our S, our T, our A, and our R. Let me pop this graphic up here one more time so that you guys can see it. Situation, task, action, and result. Again, that stands for STAR. So I want to show you a quick example of a response. Now this is kind of a long response, but I kind of want to pop it up here on the screen for you so that you can kind of see what I mean by how you can answer this question. Now you're not going to use these words word for word in your interview, but it gives you a good idea of how can you show each part of the STAR interview method. Okay, let me pop this up really quick here. So again, this is an example, and whenever I work with clients, they always tell me they get some sort of question about, tell me about a time you handled a difficult situation. Okay, so that again is an example of a STAR interview question. So in this example, the candidate says, I encountered a situation in my previous position as a business analyst. So again, they are giving you detail and context here. They say, I had the privilege of working with clients I had the privilege of working with a client that was gregarious. Okay, so here we are. I want to just mention this really quickly here. Here we are in this situation. We are saying this client was gregarious. We're not saying anything bad about the client, okay? We are bringing in words that talk about the client in a way that shows, yes, this might have been a difficult client to work with, but we're not saying that. We're saying this client was gregarious. They were full of energy. They were very eager to make things happen. So notice how we are keeping it positive. Then we say the only problem is that the client didn't have a clear goal. So now we're bringing up something positive. We're just saying they just didn't have a clear goal. So rather than saying, hey, this client was terrible, I didn't like that they didn't do this or that they didn't have a goal, we're really bringing it into a positive light. We're also saying that they didn't have a vision of what they really wanted. This led to frustration and a whole lot of misunderstanding. So now we're saying what happened, what was the background. The next paragraph here, and this is totally just based on something that a business analyst would share in an interview. Using a technique called, and they're giving a technique that they used. They say, I was able to elicit, analyze, and document ideas the client hadn't considered before. So now we're saying, this is how we got the client to kind of change their way of thinking, right? And then we're saying after that, what happened, so now we're bringing the result. After some powerful brainstorming sessions, again, brainstorming is more of an action, we developed a solution the client was over the moon with, and in the end, we received 3 referrals from this one client. So can you see, based on this response, how we are meeting those 3 tips that I shared with you again? And remember, if you're popping into this and you're here with us on the replay, comment in the comments below this video your biggest question when it comes to these types of interview questions. But can you see how we are clearly following those 3 tips I shared with you earlier, and then we're following that STAR interview technique. So again, we are really trying to make sure that we keep it positive. It's a relevant situation. It wasn't something that happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's something that was very, very in the past, but not way in the past. So again, when you're structuring these answers that you have, make sure that that you're aware of how you are portraying that to the potential employer. Okay, I have a couple minutes here before we finish up today. I do want to mention something before we have a couple questions here. I'm going to jump into the chat to answer your questions. We do have a special offer that I wanted to share with you guys today. Again, this is for my beautiful community that joins me live when I am live on YouTube here. We have our Career Advancement Toolkit. My team is going to pop the link to this inside the inside the chat for you. If you are interested in grabbing the Career Advancement Toolkit today, let me just show you a really quick what's inside so that you can look at the contents of this. Very, very powerful if you are going on an interview, because it actually walks you through the all the templates that you might need to actually go on an interview. A follow-up email template. It's also a phone interview template. We have an in-person interview template. We also have, if you have not yet constructed your resume or you're still working on updating your resume, it's huge. This has been such a huge asset to my clients and the individuals that I work with in terms of speeding up the process with them finding a new position or a new job. So again, this is inside the Career Advancement Toolkit. I will have my team link it up for you in the chat if you're interested in grabbing that. And then let's jump into some questions. Let's jump into some questions really quick. I know I had a couple come through earlier today. I sent an email out and I had a lot come through through my email, but I do want to answer just a couple questions for you guys that are here live. And again, pop in the chat if you have any questions that come up while we are talking. So we have a question that says, and I think do you say your name Zuha? Beautiful name. Is it a good idea to cook up a situation? Okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by cook up a situation, but what I think you mean is I don't know if you mean, and maybe you can clarify, Zuha, inside of the chat, if you mean like invent a situation, meaning like, should I just cause a situation at work that I have to make it, show that I can solve problems? And I would say we don't want to cause any disruption. We don't want to just invent situations, and nonetheless, we don't want to make up a situation in an interview. So definitely, I would never recommend that, of course. But what I would recommend, if you're having a hard time thinking of these situations that you've been in, where you can answer questions where they might say, hey, describe a situation where, or mention a time when. So let me show you this slide really quick again so you can kind of see. These are some of the ways that these questions come up. Give me an example of, describe a situation where, or tell me about a time when. Brainstorm a little bit if you are having a hard time finding what that situation is. So meaning, take out a pencil, take out a piece of paper, jot down some ideas, or think about things that you've done in the past where you can that you've been able to help someone solve a problem. Maybe it was even a coworker, and it doesn't have to be life-changing. It doesn't have to be huge. Just think of something, but I wouldn't ever just invent something or try and cause something to happen. Think back to just things that have happened. Super good question. Okay, another question. Hello, Michelle. How are you? So glad that you could join us today. So Michelle says, sometimes social service employers like to know the process. Yes, they do like to know the process and not just the results. Sometimes I can really get stuck in this situation and maybe say too much. Oh, this is so good. Yes. Okay. So I love what I call micro stories. And these micro stories it's not your entire career story, but they're just little tiny blippets, like stories that have happened throughout time in your career that shows your problem solving abilities. So Michelle, what I would recommend doing, I don't have any 3x5 cards here, but grab a 3x5 card. And I would do like 3 or 4 bullet points about a situation. So just, you don't have to, write out all the details right up front, but write out a couple, 3 to 4 bullet points about that specific situation that you were in and rehearse it back to yourself. Now, my recommendation is don't take any longer than 30 seconds to explain it, okay? Unless, if you're in an interview and dialogue is running, so you tell them and then they say, oh, can you go into more detail? Or can you tell me more about that? Or they want you to share more detail, that's totally fine. But rehearse it in about 30 seconds. And I want to also mention this, use some enthusiasm, use some excitement. Make sure when you are talking, I do a lot of interview coaching, and sometimes I'll say to the individual on the other end, I'll say, and this is all video or in person, tell me about a time when, and they start to slump, and it's all about body language again, and they're not as enthusiastic with their answers. Bring out some energy, bring out some enthusiasm, and try and get that answer in within 30 seconds. Write down the most important bullet point items for that question, and then cut everything else out. It's called cut the fat. Get rid of the fat. We don't want to include all the details, just the very, very, very important ones. I hope that helps, Michelle. Good question. Okay, another question from Buzz Off Honey. I love your YouTube name, fantastic, or your Google name. Sounds like it would be a great idea to build a short story book or list and associated situations to be star ready. Yes, I love this idea of building a short story book. And a lot of times people will be intimidated by the word book. It doesn't have to be something that's super like a book that has tons and tons of details. What I like to do is I even will open up a Google Doc and I'll just keep little stories in there and just details about some of the stories that have happened to me throughout the day, either with my children, with my husband, with clients that I work with, on a speaking engagement, whatever that is. I'll keep little document of just, it's almost like my storybook, like you're saying, Buzz Off Honey. But if that's too intimidating for others, don't do a book. Even just get 3x5 cards and take little tiny notes, 3 to 4 bullet points as you're thinking about a specific situation. I love that thought though. Thanks for sharing. Robin, hello. Robin is a world-class career academy student of mine. So happy you're here, Robin. Glad to have you. So Robin says, hi, Heather, is it okay to take notes in an interview? Oh, I love this question. I get this question actually quite a bit, Robin. And my thought is, it really depends on the interview you're going on. If it's more of a casual company and, like startups and things like that, where, you're not dressed to the nines and it's not a super formal interview, you might be okay taking notes. However, what I recommend instead of, breaking out your notepad and a pencil is kind of trying as hard as you can to do mental notes. And then after the interview, just do a total brain dump. Okay. Because you want to, the disadvantage with taking notes is now you're taking your attention and your focus. And again, I do have a video about body language, and maybe my team can locate that really quickly on my YouTube channel. It's the body language in an interview video, where if you're taking your eye off of your interviewer and you're spending time taking notes, what ends up happening is you're distracting yourself from what's really happening in terms of body language. Now, I spent a couple years working with a body language expert, and so I'm a big proponent of that body language in an interview. So I would say not to take notes unless, Robin, you feel like you can and you ask them ahead of time, but try your very best just to do a brain dump after of all the things that you can remember. Such a good question. Okay, we have a couple minutes left for a few more questions. Okay, I see what you're saying. So Zuha is clearing up. What if I have never been in a really tricky situation worth mentioning? I think there are certain situations that it doesn't have to be super tricky. It could be more of a simple, basic situation. Sometimes we just have to think about it for a little bit. So brainstorm as much as you can when it comes to that, so that you feel comfortable going in and sharing a few situations. Sometimes we should discuss interview appropriate clothing. Awesome, Michelle. I actually have a video on that already, but I'm super happy. I love coming and joining you guys live on the chat because it's super fun to interact with you. I'm an extrovert, so I don't know if you guys have known this before. I know I've mentioned it, but I love interacting with you guys online. I'm like a very people person. So this is like the highlight of me growing my YouTube channel and being able to interact with you is just doing this. So yes, I would love to do another live career Q&A just about that. And let me mention one more thing. I won't be live next week, but the week after that, we are talking all about LinkedIn. Now, a couple weeks ago, I put a call out and I said, hey, who wants their resume reviewed? And I did a resume review on live. It was awesome. We had some fantastic resumes, actually over a couple hundred resumes submitted for this. If you want your LinkedIn profile reviewed, I'm going to be doing the exact same thing as I did with the resumes, but LinkedIn. So I'm going to pop your LinkedIn profile up here on the screen if you are okay with that. So what that means is people are going to see your name, they're going to see your picture. It's not going to be an anonymous. But again, your LinkedIn profile is probably public for anyone, but your contact information is not going to be shared. None of that's going to be shared. If you're interested in doing and participating in that, I'm only going to be, again, choosing a few. Make sure you email me and maybe my team can pop into the chat. In fact, I'll just do it since I'm typing right now, Heather at professoroustin.com. So again, make sure you email me, and all you have to do is send me your LinkedIn URL and then tell me, give me a couple sentences why you want me to review your profile, just so that I know I'll get a lot of people that want me to do this online. So I'm totally happy to do that. Okay, couple more minutes before we close here. Couple more questions. Nisha, hello. Thanks for coming. How to calm your nerves down while heading for your interview. I tend to go blank and things just go wrong. Nisha, this sounds like me when I'm about to go on stage to speak somewhere. I go blank and I forget, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? So I actually have a video coming out in just a couple weeks on this exact topic, how to calm your nerves during an interview, something to that effect. So you will be the first to know when this video comes out. It's filled with some fantastic information. Good question, Nisha. Let's see. China says, is this scenario considered negative or poor light? Yet a difficult conflict situation. Hearing someone was spreading a rumor about you. You know what? I actually think if you can put a positive spin on that and say, something to the effect of, I understand that not everyone's perfect, and I understand that as human beings, one of our natural tendencies is to gossip, but I got caught in a situation where a coworker was gossiping. So start it with like, I understand, rather than coming at it in a negative, like, this was the worst situation. I was really hurt and scarred. Talk in terms of more of on an understanding level. Good question, China. Okay, one more question. SLK says, what if it is a very formal type business, professional business? Notes are okay in that situation. I would say no notes. And again, the reason why I'm saying no notes during an interview is because it gets distracting. Now, if you go into an interview and they say, hey, we're about to cover some really important topics. You're gonna be in an interview. Like sometimes you have panel interviews, and I work with a lot of clients that their interviews will last 2 or 3 days. They have lunch interviews, dinner interviews, all with one company. They interview with 12 people and then 3 people, and then it's if you're in that kind of a situation and they have said, hey, feel free to jot down notes while we're meeting because this is a huge process. But if you're just going in for, like a 30-minute, 1-hour interview, I don't think you need to take notes. It gets distracting. Your paper's rustling around. I'm a big believer in eye contact. So it takes you away from you watching your interviewer. Body language is so much more important than what we actually say. So again, I would just be very cautious of that. But super good questions. I'm so glad that you guys joined me today. Again, I will be live in 2 weeks to do a LinkedIn profile review. If you want your LinkedIn profile reviewed, make sure you email me. If you're on my email list, you'll get a notification about this. I'll be sending out an email to just gather some profiles to review online that day. And this is a service that I normally charge for, but I'm gonna pick a handful of people to go through their LinkedIn profiles, and we are going to do a LinkedIn profile review because I want you guys out there with a top-notch profile. So again, thank you everyone for joining me, and I will see you live again really soon.